Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Chloe Feng. Our top stories tonight. Hong Kong's highest court will hear the final appeal of journalist Bao Choy. Cathay Pacific flight attendants are set to start working to rule on Thursday. And China records its first population decline in 6 decades, while last year's economic growth fails to meet the target. Hong Kong's highest court has allowed a journalist to appeal against her conviction for using the government's database to search for vehicle records. An appeal committee comprising senior judges said the case involves important legal points. Macy Mock reports.
In November last year, the High Court rejected journalist Choi Youk-ling's appeal against her conviction, but allowed her to apply to take her case to the city's top court. The 39-year-old, better known as Bao Choy, went before the highest court today to make her case for a chance for a final appeal. In 2021, Choi was fined $6,000 after being found guilty of making false statements to the Transport Department. Her crime was selecting traffic and transport-related matters as the reason for using the government's online database to search for vehicle ownership records. There were 2 other options, but none covered journalism. The search was for an RTHK documentary on the mob attack in Yuen Long Station in 2019. In court, Choi urged the Transport Commissioner to define traffic and transport-related matters. The appeal committee allowed Choi to take her case to the top court after agreeing that the legal points are controversial and might entail a grave injustice. The case will be heard by the Court of Final Appeal on May the 3rd. Speaking outside court, Choi said the decision showed that her case involved great public interest. Through the appeal, she hopes to settle a debate on access by journalists to information. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The union representing Cathay Pacific flight attendants says its industrial action will begin on Thursday, with members refusing to work on rest days. The union apologized to passengers for any inconvenience during the work to rule. According to the airline, operations will remain normal. The union said at least 30 flights on January the 1st were understaffed. One plane carried almost 300 passengers in economy class, but had only 4 flight attendants. The union noted that layoffs at the height of COVID and pay cuts have affected morale. In a video message, Cathay Pacific Chief Executive Ronald Lam thanked staff for their work during the pandemic and promised passengers a reliable service. The number of daily high-speed rail tickets will be increased again, this time from 14,000 to 20,000 starting tomorrow, due to the high demand before the Lunar New Year. Dozens of people waited in line at West Kowloon Station this morning, but despite the increase in tickets, some left empty-handed. Tickets in the coming 3 days for trips to Guangzhou East and Guangzhou South were all sold out. Around 5.3 million people entered and left the city last year, up 1.7 times from 2021. The figure was still far short of pre-COVID levels when over 300 million people crossed the border annually. The Immigration Department, meanwhile, issued over 610,000 passports last year. Applications each month between October and December reached a record-breaking 100,000. The department vowed to ensure smooth operations at its control points following the resumption of quarantine-free travel with the mainland.
During the last 3 years, when most of the control points were closed, many of our manpower has been deployed to support our other duties. For example, the visa application, travel document applications, and new identity card visual exercise. So when we prepare for the reopening of some of the major control points, then we have deployed back all our staff back to the control points to get prepared to ensure the smooth operation of all these control points. Roughly, there's around 2,000 staff has been redeployed back to the control point to maintain the operation.
Overseas, a policeman in London has pleaded guilty to raping 12 women in a 20-year reign of terror. The city's police chief apologized and admitted that the force had let women down. Sachin Kadvi reports.
In a major embarrassment for London's Metropolitan Police Force, a veteran officer has pleaded guilty to 24 counts of rape. Serial rapist David Carrick, who has been a policeman for 20 years, handled duties in Parliament and diplomatic missions. His crimes came to light in late 2021 when a victim whom he met through a dating app accused him of raping her in a hotel room. Carrick, aged 48, was subsequently suspended, but his arrest encouraged other victims who had feared him to come forward. One of his earliest victims was a woman who was falsely imprisoned and raped in 2003 when he was still on probation. The scandal forced the police commissioner to apologize.
Not only have we let down the women in this case, the survivors who've courageously come forward, but I completely recognise that's going to be the reaction of many women across London, and indeed more widely. But every time we get a case like this, particularly one as ghastly as this, it is going to shake that confidence. I recognise that, and I'm determined to confront it. All I can say is, I'm sorry.
Carrick had used his position as an officer to gain his victims' trust. It was a textbook case of a sadistic rapist who used assault, abuse and violence. He will be sentenced next month. Sachin Kadvi, HKIBC.
Russia says by arming Ukrainian troops, the West does not want peace between Moscow and Kyiv. The United States is also training Ukrainian soldiers.
Soldiers from the Ukrainian Armed Forces have arrived here at the Fire Center of Excellence at Fort Sill, Oklahoma to begin air defense training. This training will consist of operator and maintainer tasks for the Patriot air defense system.
The arrival of 100 Ukrainian troops signals that Kyiv will soon get the Patriot missile system that it has been demanding for a long time. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, meanwhile, has pledged more weapons for Ukraine. The arms include tanks and armored personnel carriers and is one of Britain's biggest arms packages to the Ukrainians. China's population has declined for the first time in 61 years. This came as the economy grew at its slowest pace since the 1970s. For a country that created an economic miracle, last year was one of concern as growth and the population fell. The authorities had set an economic growth target of 5.5%. but achieved only 3%, a sharp drop from 8.4% in 2021. Full-year gross domestic product stood at 121 trillion yuan. In the fourth quarter, growth slowed from 3.9% to 2.9%, but it was still better than expected given the COVID backlash. Full-year GDP was the worst since 2020, with only 2.3% when the pandemic struck. Kang Yi, director of the National Bureau of Statistics, attributed the slowdown to increased geopolitical tensions and global economic downward pressure on top of lockdowns and curbs.
随着疫情防控这个转入新阶段。
But said this year will be better with the end of the COVID-0 policy. Last month's retail sales fell 1.8% year-on-year, beating market expectations of a 9% slump. Industrial output growth slowed down to 1.3% last month, while fixed asset investment came in at 5.1%. The urban jobless rate eased to 5.5% last month, but was over 16% for teenagers and young adults. The authorities meanwhile disclosed that the population plummeted by 850,000 to 1.4118 billion last year as deaths outnumbered births. That's compared to 1.4126 billion people in 2021.
It was the first decline since 1961. About 9.56 million babies were born last year, compared with 10.62 million a year earlier. Economists forecast the downward trend to continue because of high child-raising costs and the changed perception on marriages. India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous country soon.
The Hang Seng Index has fallen from a 6-month high, losing 0.8%, as the latest data showed the mainland economy continuing to slow down. Wuxi Biologics fell 6% after its chairman decided to part with 56 million shares. Hainan-based Semcare Pharma took a 15% hit after outsourcing production for some of its drugs. Casino stocks went down despite the forthcoming holiday season, with MGM China losing 4.5% and Sands China 2.7% lower. And now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down 169 points. Top 10 active stocks: Wuxi Bio lost $4.50, Alibaba up $1.10, Meituan down 80 cents. Ping An lost $1.45, and Hong Kong exchanges lost $4.80. Forex trading against Hong Kong dollars, the euro is at 8.48, British pound at 9.57, Australian dollar at 5.43. Moving on to the UK market, the London FTSE is currently down 15 points. On to the weather now. It will be cold in the morning tomorrow, with a minimum temperature of 12 degrees. Overcast and dry through the day with a maximum temperature of 18 degrees. Bright and sunny in the next few days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Tuesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Chloe Feng. Thanks for watching. Good night.